The ashtray overflowed with cigarettes I didn't smoke. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding, eyes on that glass bowl of ash and lipstick-stained filters. They weren't mine. They sure weren't Lisa's. She hated smoking. So whose? A question that burned like acid at the back of my throat. My breath stalled. Something inside me screamed, "Move, John, move." But for a few seconds I just froze. When I stepped forward, my mind fired rapid snapshots, the half-open curtains letting in faint twilight, the flickering ceiling light that hadn't acted up before, the rhythmic drip of the faucet in the kitchen. And the strangest detail, a man's jacket slung over the chair, a brand label I'd never seen. I took one more step. Then I heard her voice from upstairs, soft, urgent, entangled with a hushed murmur I recognized only by tone. A deep, confident male timbre. My stomach twisted. I forced my feet up the stairs, dread fueling every step. The hallway stretched like a tunnel, silent except for muffled breathing beyond our bedroom door. My bedroom door. My hand trembled on the knob. I eased it open. They didn't see me at first. Lisa was on the bed, her blouse half undone, her hair disheveled, eyes half closed. Mark, was leaning over her, hands stroking her cheek, lips just inches from hers. The sight was at once surreal and scorching, hammered into my mind. They were so absorbed in each other's presence they didn't hear my ragged breath. For a moment I just stood there, adrenaline rushing, rage erupting, but so compressed in my chest that I couldn't speak. It felt like 1,000 shards of glass scraping my insides. "That's my bed," I wanted to scream. "That's my wife." He had one leg on the floor and one knee on the mattress, leaning in as though he owned the place. The half-drawn curtains, the lamp on the nightstand, the subtle scent of Lisa's perfume, these details created a snapshot of private intimacy I had no part in. I hated them for it, but mostly I hated myself for letting it happen. She noticed me first. Her eyes went wide, her hand shot to her chest. The panic in her face might have been comedic in another life, but here it was heartbreak in real time. Mark turned, startled. His shirt hung open at the neck, revealing a toned chest. He looked at me in stunned silence for a beat, then he grabbed his belt from the floor. My mouth still refused to form words. I took one step inside, fists at my sides. Lisa jumped up, tried to button her blouse, stuttering, John, I can explain." She was breathing hard, cheeks flushed. Mark just glared at me, then looked away. Coward. I saw the guilt or maybe fear in his eyes. Then he moved like he wanted to slip past me, but I blocked the exit. "Explain." I finally forced out, voice trembling but soft. "That's my bed." She swallowed. "I know." "Please," just her voice caught. She was about to cry, I could tell, but I felt no pity. Not then. Mark kept quiet, stepping back, scanning for a way out. I gave him a single look. I almost wanted to throw a punch to knock him flat. But something inside me whispered, "Not yet. Don't degrade yourself." It was a sudden, twisted clarity. Like I was outside my body, an observer. Another breath. Another beat. The clock on the bedside table ticked loud as a drum. All those years of marriage reduced to this humiliating minute. I turned back to my wife. "Get him out," I said. Then I took a step aside to open the path. Mark slid past me, too afraid or too ashamed to speak. I heard his footsteps thunder down the stairs and out the front door. Lisa made a move to follow him, but I grabbed her wrist gently. "You stay," I said, eyes locked on hers. "We're not done." She sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I stood there, listening to the front door slam, feeling the shockwaves of betrayal. My pulse hammered like I'd run a marathon, but outwardly I tried to keep myself in check. I wanted to lash out, but the images were too raw, too immediate. I needed a method. Downstairs, the kettle began to whistle, a high-pitched shriek that cut through the silence. I turned on my heel and left the room. She called my name, but I didn't answer. The tea kettle screamed louder. My mind was spinning. Coffee? Tea? Something to do with my hands, so I wouldn't do something else with them. I didn't pour the water. I just let the kettle wail until it hissed itself out. Then I turned off the burner and stared at the blank tiles of the backsplash. The old clock over the fridge ticked each second. My heart pounded in time. I was short of breath, dizzy with anger, disbelief, heartbreak. Mostly heartbreak. That night, I slept on the couch. Or tried to. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw them tangled together, half-naked, that flush of passion on her face. A face I used to kiss every morning, every night. Her eyelids fluttered for him. Not me. The thought made my chest tighten as though pinned by an iron bar. By sunrise, I had decided on 3 steps. My internal monologue was cold, deliberate, like a man planning a war, except the battlefield was my marriage. I wasn't proud, but I felt compelled. Step 1. Expose the lie in front of our daughter. Maybe that sounds cruel, but I was done letting Lisa hide behind illusions of a perfect family. If our teenage girl deserved anything, it was the truth. I wanted the mask off. For years I tried to shield our child from adult conflicts. I made excuses when Lisa's attention drifted. I turned a blind eye to suspicious phone calls. No more. That morning, as I shuffled into the kitchen, I found Lisa making breakfast in silence. Our daughter, Sarah, sat at the table tapping on her phone. Lisa glanced at me, eyes rimmed with dark circles. "Good morning," she whispered. I just stared at her. Then I turned to Sarah. "Your mother has a friend. You might meet him soon." Sarah blinked, surprised by my abrupt tone. Lisa inhaled sharply. She opened her mouth to object, then closed it. She threw me a desperate look, but I offered nothing. Instead, I slid into a chair and sipped the coffee she'd poured. My words hung in the air, loaded with the pain I refused to articulate. Sarah frowned. "What friend?" Lisa's hand trembled as she set down a pan of scrambled eggs. "It's complicated," she said, voice shaking. "Let's not, eh?" I cut her off. "He's someone your mother invited into our home when I wasn't around." Silence. The tension was suffocating. Sarah's eyes darted between us. "She's only 14, I reminded myself. But the truth was unstoppable. Sarah needed to see that her mother was not the perfect woman we both tried to uphold. I felt cruel. I also felt justified. Lisa's shoulders slumped in defeat. Then the phone rang. My old landline phone, mounted on the wall. The shrill ring almost made me jump. Lisa dropped the spatula, rushed to answer. Sarah blinked at me, mouth slightly open. "Hello?" Lisa's voice was tight. Then her expression changed. Fear. Guilt. A flicker of desperation. She lifted her eyes to me. And I heard it, faint but unmistakable, a man's voice on the other end. "Mark." Confident, too casual. Like it was perfectly normal to call my house in the morning. My hands clenched. The clock above the fridge ticked on. Sarah said, "Mom? Who is it?" Lisa gaped. Then Mark must have said something that pushed her over the edge. She shouted into the receiver, "Get back here, you bastard," and slammed it down. The sudden violence of the gesture stunned us both. The phone rattled on the hook. Sarah's eyes went wide as plates. Lisa's face turned ghostly white. I said nothing. Step 1 complete. The denial was shattered. Let her try to pretend everything was normal now. Let our daughter see the cracks. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Lisa's desk drawers. Sure, it was intrusive. But the sense of violation was overshadowed by my need to understand. And I found the postcards, the receipts for motels 2 hours away from home, signed with scribbles that matched her handwriting. I found references to Mark's business addresses in her neat, looping script. My heart thundered in my ears. I also found an old battered copy of Solaris. My copy. The same one I'd been reading as a college student. It looked out of place among her papers, but I flipped it open. Between the pages was a slip of lined paper, folded carefully. I opened it. "I couldn't tell you. He promised to leave. Forgive me if you can." The note was short, precise, like a confession. My throat closed up. This time, though, there was no shock. There was just a slow, simmering fury. "Forgive me if you can." Could I? Did I want to? I leafed through the book. A random page caught my eye, underlined in pencil. He forgave. And died. The irony struck me like a good punch. Lisa must have placed it there deliberately, either as a cruel joke or a silent plea. Maybe both. Step 2 in my plan, keep the daily routine going while I freeze her out. Kill the trust by letting her feel my distance. So I continued to wake at dawn, make my coffee, iron my shirts. I still asked Sarah about her school projects. But I refused to meet Lisa's eyes. At dinner, I spoke only to Sarah. When Lisa tried to start a conversation, I gave clipped one-word answers. I cleaned up in the kitchen without acknowledging her presence. I slept in the spare bedroom. I never raised my voice. I withdrew everything else instead. She followed me around the house for 3 days, tears welling in her eyes. "John," she'd say softly. "Please. We need to talk." I'd just nod and keep walking. She touched my arm. I brushed her hand away. She tried to sit beside me at the table. I'd stand up and leave. All the while, I watched her with a cold, analytical eye, the same way I watch company negotiations at work. She was unraveling day by day. The guilt, the shame, maybe regret, I didn't care. I wanted her to feel the hole she'd carved in me. On the 4th day, Sarah asked if we could practice the piano together. Usually we do that on weekends, our little father-daughter bonding time. Lisa leaned against the doorway, eyes red. I could see the tension in her fingers. She wanted to join in, but she didn't dare speak. I suspect she yearned to fix something by playing a happy family. But the chord was broken. And that afternoon, Sarah and I got into a small argument about who'd play first. It was silly, typical teenage stuff. But right then, the phone rang again. She grabbed it, half laughing, half exasperated with me. The second I heard a man's voice on the line, something snapped inside me. I recognized Mark's tone, gentle, coaxing, as if he had every right to call. Sarah glanced up at me, confusion in her eyes. "Dad, who is it?" I clenched my jaw. Lisa turned white as a sheet, flung the phone to the couch and screamed, "Get back here, you bastard." It was the same phrase she'd used before. Desperation coated her voice. My daughter stared at her mother in horror. It was the moment Sarah truly realized this was no small misunderstanding. This was betrayal. The phone's dial tone buzzed ominously in the silence. That night, Lisa cornered me in the hallway. "John, you can't keep shutting me out. We have to speak. If we don't, we'll never fix this." I let out a breath, slow and measured. "Fix?" I repeated. "Do you think there's anything left to fix?" My voice was quiet. She blinked, tears threatening. I never wanted it this way. I was lonely. You were distant. Mark, I held up a hand. Not another word. My voice trembled with a calm that felt more terrifying than shouting. I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She must have realized that my silence was more dangerous than any rage. Each day that followed, the distance between us grew until the house felt like a tomb. Lisa tried to keep up her usual routines, making dinner, washing clothes, but everything was forced. Sarah tried to escape the tension by spending more time in her room or going out with friends. The hush in the living room at night was broken only by the hum of the air conditioner or the ticking of the old grandfather clock near the stairwell. One evening, after I'd stacked the dishes, I walked into the living room and saw Lisa holding the phone in her lap, just staring at it. She was waiting for Mark's call. Or maybe she was deciding whether to call him herself. She didn't dial. But that phone looked heavier than a tombstone in her hands. Step 3 in my plan, confront the man. Not physically, no. I wanted him to see that I was not one of those clueless husbands who'd walk away quietly. I wanted him to know he'd destroyed something in me and I'd never let it go. But I also wanted Lisa to witness that confrontation. She needed to see that trust doesn't die with a single blow, it's corroded piece by piece, second by second, word by word. So I arranged it. A week after I discovered them, I called Mark from my work phone. He picked up on the second ring, sounding casual. "Hello? Mark?" I said, voice firm. "This is John." A long pause. "Then I guessed you might call eventually. Are you, I want you at my house tomorrow evening. 6 o'clock. He hesitated. "John, I'm not sure that's a..." 6, I repeated, then hung up. The next day was a Friday. At 5:30, I returned home. Lisa was pacing in the living room, hair tied back, face drawn with tension. Sarah was in her room, presumably with music turned up to shut out the tension below. I loosened my tie, walked into the kitchen, and grabbed a glass of water. She followed me. "You asked him to come here?" she demanded, voice trembling. "What are you going to do?" I set down the glass, leaning against the counter. "We're just going to talk," I said. "At least, that's the plan." She looked terrified. "John, please promise me you won't do anything violent." I almost laughed. "I'm not going to kill him, Lisa. Relax." Her eyes flicked away. She pressed her lips together, clearly still anxious. I lifted the glass to my mouth, took a deliberate sip. Then I walked back to the living room. The ticking clock over the mantel sounded like gunfire in my ears. My heartbeat hammered in time. At 6 on the dot, the doorbell rang. I glanced at Lisa. She stood off to the side, her arms wrapped around her chest. I opened the door. Mark looked far too polished, freshly shaven, wearing a crisp button-down shirt and expensive shoes. He tried to give me a polite nod, but I just stepped aside, letting him in without a word. We stood there, 3 people in a silent triangle. The overhead light flickered again, a quiet hum from the old wiring. Outside, the sky was heavy with twilight. Mark cleared his throat. "John," he began, "I'm sorry. I never intended." I lifted a hand to stop him. "Sit," I said, pointing to the armchair. He obeyed. Lisa hovered by the couch, trembling. I remained standing, arms folded. For a long time, none of us spoke. The hush was deafening. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why?" Mark glanced at Lisa, then at me. "We just connected. I didn't set out to ruin your marriage. It wasn't on purpose." Lisa bowed her head. I stared at him, eyes cold. "Do you love her?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then he inhaled, forced himself to speak. "I care about her a lot. I don't know if I nodded slowly, a bitter smile twisting my lips. "So you destroyed my family for something you're not even sure about." "Got it." Lisa let out a choked sound, pressing her hand to her mouth. The overhead light flickered again, casting shadows. The clock on the mantel let out a hollow gong. Once, twice, 6:30. Mark swallowed. John, I never meant for you to find out like this. Lisa said, eh. She said a lot of things, I'm sure, I cut in. My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling with the desire to scream. Instead, I pressed my nails into my palms. Lisa stepped forward, arms tight around her body. John, this conversation, maybe we should do it in private. Between us. Mark Kinney. No, I said, not looking at her. We settle this here with him because that's how it started. You let him into our home. So I'll let him see how it ends. Mark's eyes darted around, fear creeping in. Maybe he expected me to punch him. Maybe he expected me to break down and sob. Instead, I just stared, channeling the quiet wrath that had built all week. Do you know, I said, voice soft, that every day since I found you in my room, I've imagined what I'd do to you if I caught you alone? He twitched. A muscle in his jaw clenched. Lisa blurted, John, don't. I ignored her. I pictured 100 scenarios. But each time I realized something. Hitting you, throwing you out a window, threatening your life, that would let Lisa call me a monster. It would let you both blame me. I won't give you the satisfaction. I'd rather watch your guilt devour you from the inside. I paused, letting that sink in. Mark swallowed hard. Lisa's cheeks were pale, her breathing shallow. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded note from Solaris. I opened it, read it aloud. I couldn't tell you. He promised to leave. Forgive me if you can. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to stay calm. Lisa wrote that, I said, looking at Mark. You told her you'd leave me, so she believed you. Thought maybe that was a solution. But guess what? You lied to her too. Didn't you? He cleared his throat. I didn't. I might have said I just meant I'd break things off if it got messy. I finished for him. Now you see how messy it is. Because this is what's left of my marriage, a silent war zone, a daughter who knows her mother betrayed me, and a life I used to love that's turned into ashes. My gaze flicked to the corner where that damned ashtray still sat, full of Mark's cigarettes. All for nothing. Lisa's eyes shimmered. John, her voice trembled. I'm so sorry. I refused to look at her. Take him and leave, I said quietly. Or stay. Do whatever you want. But don't expect my forgiveness. Mark rose, uneasy. Listen, man, I get you're angry, but No, I said. You don't get it. If you did, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have touched my wife. He blinked, lowering his head. He had no retort to that. Lisa took a step toward me. I don't want to leave. I want to fix this somehow. I let out a bitter laugh. Fix? Like you can glue the shards together? There's no trust left. It's dead. And you, I pointed at Mark. You're the one who hammered in the nails. So get out of my house. Mark looked at Lisa, silently asking if she'd follow. She hesitated, tears rolling down her cheeks. Then, to my surprise, she whispered, I'm staying. Mark's face flickered with an emotion I couldn't name, disappointment maybe. But he gave a stiff nod and headed for the door. He paused, turned back to me as if he wanted to say something. My glare told him all he needed to know. He left, footsteps echoing on the porch, the front door clicking shut behind him. I felt a small flicker of grim satisfaction. I brought him here to face me, to face us. Now he was gone. Lisa stood in the living room, hands clasped like a penitent. She waited for me to speak. I just stared at the door. The flickering overhead light sputtered again, making the room wink from bright to dim. She said my name, voice cracking. John? I turned. My face was expressionless. I'm done. With him, with you, with this marriage as it was. She tried to approach, but I took a step back. John, I swear, it's over with Mark. I was lonely, I needed it. Needed what? I demanded quietly. Someone else's arms? A thrill. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't know how to reach you. You were so distant. After your father died, you built these walls around yourself. I cut her off with a slice of my hand through the air. Don't drag my father into this. You chose to cheat. You invited him into our bed. And you left that note in my book. Why? Did you want me to find it? Was it a cry for help or some twisted game? She shook her head. I couldn't keep lying. But I was scared you'd, I don't know, explode. Or do exactly what you're doing right now, shutting me out. A bleak laugh escaped my lips. You want an explosion? Look around, Lisa. Everything we built is in ruins. I paused, voice turning hollow. And you want to fix it by begging for forgiveness? There's nothing left to fix. That's what you don't understand. She pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing silently. I stared at her, numb. The irony was I once loved her so much I couldn't imagine a day without her. Now, I felt only a dull ache. Step 3 was complete. I had faced the man who took my place. I had exposed Lisa's secret to our daughter, stripped her illusions. I had turned our life into a cold, silent performance. Trust was well and truly dead. I'd killed it with methodical precision. The following week was pure limbo. Lisa slept in the master bedroom. I stayed in the spare. She tried to talk to me every morning. I responded with nothing more than a nod or a curt morning. At night, I made dinner and set a plate for Sarah, never for Lisa. She had to fix her own or quietly take from what I made. She never complained. She never argued. If Sarah wasn't around, we'd drift in and out of the same rooms like ghosts. No mention of Mark, no mention of the future. Inside, I felt like a chasm had opened. Rage threatened to swallow me if I let my guard down. So I didn't. Instead, I poured my energy into work, staying at the office late, volunteering for extra projects. My manager asked me if everything was okay. I just shrugged. One night, after a punishing 12-hour shift, I came home to find Lisa in the living room with Sarah. They had textbooks and notes spread out like Lisa was helping her with homework. Sarah spotted me in the doorway, face uncertain. Lisa set aside a pencil and rose. "John, can we talk? Please. It's important." I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, set my briefcase down. "Sarah," I said gently, "could you go to your room for a few minutes?" Sarah looked at her mother, then at me, and left quietly. Her footsteps on the stairs were slow, reluctant. When she was gone, Lisa moved closer. "I've tried to respect your silence, but this can't go on. It's tearing Sarah apart. We live in the same house, but it's like a war zone. I can't fix the past. But can we at least find a way to exist? Without punishing each other every second of the day?" I studied her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders drooped. I recalled the vibrant woman I'd married, full of laughter and soft humor. That woman was unrecognizable now. "You still think I'm punishing you?" I asked. "Don't you get it? I'm punishing myself. I'm still here, living with a woman who betrayed me, eating at the same table, pretending to have a normal life. I should have walked out that first night. But I stayed for Sarah." A tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't break. "Then let's figure out a way to co-parent at least. Do you want a divorce? Is that it?" The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I exhaled slowly. Maybe that's what it'll come to. But right now, I'm too drained to make that decision. And there's Sarah. She loves both of us. Lisa wiped at her tears. She deserves better than this silent hostility. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but could we talk calmly? Maybe with a counselor? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I closed my eyes, remembering that line in Solaris, he forgave. And died. Did I want to forgive her? What if it killed something else inside me? My pride, my sense of self-worth. Or maybe that thing was already dead. Finally, I said, "I'll think about it." It was the first time in days I'd given her anything other than a stone wall. She exhaled shakily like I'd handed her a lifeline. But I felt no relief. I felt hollow. When she tried to thank me, I just shook my head and walked away to the spare room. The next morning, I woke early as usual. The house was quiet. I brewed coffee, listened to the drip of the machine. My reflection in the window over the sink looked old. Lines etched deeper than before. My chest felt tight, but not from heartbreak this time, more from a numb acceptance. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd taken my revenge by letting her taste the poison of a broken marriage day after day while Mark was shut out. But victory didn't feel sweet. It tasted like ashes. Sarah stumbled into the kitchen, hair ruffled. She yawned, then asked, "Dad, can I talk to you?" I nodded, pulled out a chair. "Sure." She bit her lip, fiddling with the sleeve of her pajama top. "I know something bad happened between you and Mom and that man. I'm not stupid. But I hate how it's been ever since. You barely talk. She cries a lot. I don't want to lose our family." My chest constricted. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I never meant to drag you into this." She looked at me with those big eyes that once belonged to a little girl who thought her dad was a hero. "But you did," she whispered. "I just want you to know, whatever happens with you and Mom, I still love you both. And I can't stand seeing you suffer." I blinked away, moisture in my own eyes. "I love you, too. But this is complicated." She nodded. We shared a moment of raw honesty. Then she got up, grabbed a juice box, and left. I felt the sting of shame. My daughter was more mature about this than I was. Maybe that was the final push I needed. That afternoon, I found Lisa in the backyard, just standing there, gazing at the empty bird feeder. She wore an old sweater, hair in a loose ponytail. She turned when I approached, startled. "I'll do counseling," I said flatly. "If that's still what you want." Her eyes widened with cautious hope. "Yes. Whatever it takes." I forced a nod. "I can't promise you'll like the results. But I'll try." She sniffled, blinking back tears. I turned away, not wanting to see her cry again. The tension in my gut loosened slightly like uncoiling a wire. Maybe this was the next chapter, painful, uncertain, but at least it was motion instead of stagnation. A week passed, then another. We scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor in town, a soft-spoken woman named Teresa who asked gentle but searing questions. The first session was raw. Lisa sobbed, told her side, she'd felt abandoned, invisible. Mark provided attention and warmth she craved. I clenched my fists as she spoke, forcing myself not to walk out. Teresa turned to me, asked how I felt. I said in a halting voice that I'd never felt such betrayal, such rage. But I didn't physically hurt anyone. Instead, I withdrew, let my anger fester, and took quiet revenge by humiliating Lisa in front of Sarah. Teresa gently reminded me that our daughter was an innocent bystander. That stung. I realized I'd used Sarah as a pawn. It was an admission I'd never wanted to make, but it was true. I left that session exhausted, as though I'd run 10 miles uphill in the Texas heat. Lisa and I had more sessions. We tried to talk at home in calm voices about how we got here, who we'd become. She apologized repeatedly. I admitted I'd closed myself off after my father's death. We started the slow process of unearthing resentments, old wounds, miscommunications. The infidelity was the final blow to a marriage that had been eroding for years, even if I never acknowledged it. One evening, about a month into counseling, I was home alone, flipping through the battered copy of Solaris. I kept reading that quote, "He forgave and died." Something in me recoiled from the idea of forgiveness. But another part of me realized that carrying this hatred was poisoning my life. Did I want to be defined by Lisa's betrayal? Or by my capacity to move on? I set the book aside, leaned back in my chair. The overhead light flickered again, that same buzz. The clock ticked. In the distance, I heard the faint sound of Sarah practicing the piano. A piece of me felt gratitude that she still found music in our house of silence. That night, I told Lisa I wouldn't sleep in the spare room anymore. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, but she didn't try to touch me. We lay in bed, side by side, an entire ocean between us. At some point, I dreamed about standing in a hallway with no doors, just infinite length stretching into darkness. When I woke, I felt something shift in my chest. More time passed. Mark tried calling Lisa's cell phone a few times. She ignored him, showed me the call log to prove it. I didn't say much. My focus was on our daughter, our therapy sessions, and the faint possibility of building a new foundation. Yet the memory of them together in my bed was still burned into my mind. Some nights, I'd cringe at the recollection, gripping the sheets until my knuckles were white. Yet my fury had lost some of its heat. I'd inflicted my cold vengeance, and it brought me no lasting satisfaction. So I found myself in a limbo of numb acceptance and distant hope. Lisa walked on eggshells around me, uncertain if I'd snap. But I'd grown too tired for outbursts. All I wanted was clarity. Did I want to remain with a woman who'd betrayed me? Or was I staying just to keep the illusion for Sarah? The months turned to half a year. We kept going to counseling. We shared painful truths, sometimes shouting at each other in that safe office space. I told her, point blank, that my trust was shattered. She told me she still loved me and would do anything to regain even a fragment of that trust. Teresa guided us carefully, never sugarcoating the difficulty of rebuilding. One late evening, after returning home from a long day at work, I found Lisa in the kitchen, drying dishes. Sarah had gone to a friend's place for the night. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock. I watched Lisa's movements, delicate, purposeful. The lines of stress around her eyes had softened a bit. She glanced at me, then back at the plate in her hand. I cleared my throat. "Lisa." She set the plate aside, turning to face me. "Yes." I didn't know what I intended to say. My mind was a swirl of half-formed sentiments. Apologies, regrets, maybe sorrow. Finally, I just said, "You hurt me beyond measure. I don't know if I'll ever be the same." Tears shimmered at once. "I know." I pressed my palm against the cool counter. "But I'm not sure if leaving is the solution anymore. We've done the therapy. You've changed. I see that. You ended it with Mark. You've tried to earn back my trust. Maybe that's worth something." She swallowed hard. "It's worth everything to me. I can't undo the past, John. But if you give me one more chance, I promise I'll never break your faith again." My heart thudded. I inhaled, slow and deliberate. "I'm not promising we'll be perfect. But I'm willing to keep trying. For Sarah, yes, but also for us. Because there was something good here once. We lost it. Maybe we can find it again." The relief in her eyes nearly broke me. She stepped forward, tentatively, as if approaching a wild animal. I let her rest a hand on my chest. My pulse hammered under her palm. I remembered how that same hand once touched Mark. The sting was still there, but it was a memory, painful, raw, but no longer the entire story. That night, we sat at the table with cups of tea, talking in low voices, sharing old stories, old jokes. We were two survivors sifting through rubble hoping to find something salvageable. Months stretched further. The day came when I realized I no longer flinched at the mention of Mark's name. He'd moved to another part of town or maybe left altogether. He was an absence, a negative space. Lisa and I were forging a fragile new intimacy built on honesty. Each day was a small test. I'd catch her worried eyes searching my face for signs of doubt. I'd check her phone calls, partially out of habit, partially out of an old fear. She let me see whatever I wanted. Maybe that's trust. Maybe that's desperation. Sarah seemed calmer too. She smiled more often, rejoined our dinners. Sometimes we'd argue about who got to play the piano first, those mundane disagreements that are a sign of ordinary family life. Lisa would hover by my shoulder as we made dinner, offering to chop vegetables, and occasionally we'd share an accidental laugh over some silly remark. It was progress, albeit slow. Still, each night, in the quiet darkness, I'd feel the ache. The knowledge that she let another man into our bed. That I'd planned a calculated emotional revenge. That neither of us was innocent. But I was alive. I was pushing forward. 3 years later, I'm telling you this story because it matters. It's not a tale of shining redemption or a perfect reconciliation. It's a story about betrayal, about the marriage that collapsed, about a father's desperate attempt to keep his family from shattering entirely. Lisa and I found a new normal, less naive, less trusting, but perhaps more honest. We never divorced, but we also never spoke Mark's name again after therapy concluded. Some pains are best left in the shadows. I still think about that night I found them. Sometimes I wake in a sweat, imagining the flickering lamp, the soft gasps, the look on Lisa's face when she saw me. In those moments, I remind myself that not every scar has to define us. We choose how to carry them. If you ask me, did you really forgive her? I'm not sure I have an answer. Maybe I forgave as much as I was able, and maybe that part of me did die, the part that believed unwaveringly in us. But there's another part of me that learned how to keep going, how to be a father, how to share a house with someone who once betrayed me. Is that forgiveness or just endurance? When I hold Lisa at night now, there's a tenderness laced with caution. We've grown older, lines etched by sorrow and regret, but also by some hard-won acceptance of our flaws. The love we have today isn't the same as the wide-eyed romance of our youth. It's a battered, weathered thing shaped by heartbreak. But it's still ours. I promised you a story with an ending that might be called satisfying, but I can't say if it's the one you hoped for. Some men find solace in revenge that ends with a dramatic exit, slamming the door behind them. Others choose violence, dangerous, destructive, possibly lethal. But I discovered a third path, the slow, grueling process of confrontation, truth, and a half-broken marriage that limps forward. It might not be glorious, but it's real. It's the path I chose because I couldn't bear to lose my daughter's respect entirely or to abandon the life we built. My revenge was cold, methodical, and it burned me as much as it burned Lisa. In the end, I realized the price was too high, even for the satisfaction of punishing her. So I stand here, after all is said and done, living after her, in one sense, after the woman she used to be. And yet, ironically, still living with her in another sense, day by day. We endure side by side, forging a fragile peace. Whether it will endure forever, I can't say. But for now, we keep going. And perhaps that, in its own stark way, is a victory. The trust is gone. I won't pretend otherwise. But we've built something else, something raw and honest. Maybe that's more valuable than illusions of perfection. At night, before I close my eyes, I sometimes open that old copy of Solaris, the one with the note Lisa left. I read the underlined passage, he forgave. And died. I set the book down, slip under the covers next to a wife who's both stranger and companion. The clock on the wall ticks, the old light flickers. My last waking thought is always the same, I survived. We survived. But there's a scar that will never fade. Then I shut my eyes and let darkness cradle me. And in that silence, I know that not every pain is visible, but it can still eat you alive if you let it. I won't let it. Not anymore.